What is my purpose?
You give Rust Stalkers +1 movement.
Oh my god.
What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and we have another faction-focused article for 10th edition Warhammer 40k out today. This is the kind of long-awaited Adeptus Mechanicus. This article out now, and it's showcasing some interesting things about the design philosophy for Warhammer 40k. Now, I have a video that's not out quite yet, but I discuss a little bit the fact that factions are getting a unique identity within 10th edition, where they're basically occupying a piece of the color pie. That's a Magic the Gathering term referring to the 5 colors of Magic, each one of them having their own strengths and weaknesses. And we're seeing that embodied in these factions in that each one of them has its own unique theme. We saw previously Necrons have leader matters, Tyranids have synapse matters, and now with Adeptus Mechanicus we're getting battle line matters, where their battle line units are going to be core to how the faction functions. And this is super cool. So let's dive into exactly what that means for the faction, first with their army rules. We got both the army rule and the detachment rule for Adeptus Mechanicus, but the army rule, Doctrina Imperatives, is certainly the most exciting of the two. At the start of the battle round, you can select one of the 2 Doctrina Imperatives, either Protector or Conqueror Imperative, and you gain those bonuses until the end of the battle round. The next battle round, you'll just choose another imperative. You can choose the same one or switch to the other. The Protector Imperative gives all of your ranged weapons the heavy ability. This, unlike previous editions, is actually a bonus, since the heavy ability now gives you +1 to hit if you remain stationary. So applying that benefit to every weapon in the army means that you can have things like radium carbines and smaller small arms weapons easily getting +1 to hit by standing still. In addition, you also get -1 AP on enemy attacks targeting units within your own deployment zone. And deployment zone play is really a core to Adeptus Mechanicus now. A lot of these abilities are going to key off of you or your opponent's deployment zone. And we can see this in the other imperative, the Conqueror Imperative. This gives every ranged weapon the assault ability. Now, this is a huge deal for a reason that we'll talk about later, because this army does have an easy way to advance and charge. So you're going to be able to apply assault to an entire unit's weapons, advance and fire, now without penalty thanks to the new assault mechanics, then charge with that unit, which is a huge burst of speed. In addition, if they attack someone within your opponent's deployment zone, you get +1 AP on your attack, ranged attacks only. Importantly, these are both within deployment zones, not wholly within deployment zones, so even if your opponent is trailed back to an objective that's in their deployment zone, and they're touching the edge of the deployment zone by a little bit, you're gonna get the benefit of those doctrinas against that unit, or with your own unit. So if you're planning to go into Protector Imperative, it might be a good idea to keep your Skitarii units or something trailed back to touch the edge of your deployment zone. So now meshing into this are the stratagems that we have previewed in the article. And it looks like the stratagems for the Rad cohort, the detachment that we're getting for Adeptus Mechanicus, is heavily keyed towards which Doctrina that you're in. Now, interestingly, while we have seen other stratagems in other factions get an enhanced effect when used in specific situations, the stratagems for Adeptus Mechanicus are in fact only usable in those situations. So it's a little bit of a break from the tradition that we've seen so far in 10th edition, where a stratagem will have an effect, but if you use it on a specific unit or in a specific time, then you'll get an additional bonus. These ones have restrictions that you can only activate them during a particular imperative. These are all a reframing of the old Doctrina Imperative abilities, such as Aggressor Imperative, which gives you the ability to advance and charge if the Conqueror Imperative is active for your army. So that's the one that gives you assault on your weapons. You can then advance, fire your weapons, and charge. And with some of the disruptive effects that Adeptus Mechanicus infantry have, this is actually a huge deal. Getting additional threat range on those units to get them into opponents' faces is going to be enormous. Similarly, the Bulwark Imperative also sees a return. This one is only used when the Protector Imperative is active for your army and when one of your units is selected as the target of an opponent's attacks. It gives that unit a 4+ invulnerable save. Pretty easy. You're just rotating your ion shields, basically, for 1 CP. In this article, we do see that some Adeptus Mechanicus units are getting slightly easier to kill, but the implementation of a 4+ invulnerable save on those units certainly switches that around a little bit. I imagine that we'll have a lot less defensive things going on, where you've been able to stack enormous defensive buffs onto a single brick of Skitarii. I think those are probably all going by the wayside, but at least we will still have this 4+ invulnerable save to keep those large units of infantry alive. So now moving on to the slightly less exciting detachment ability for the Rad cohort detachment. This is Rad Bombardment. And like I said before, deployment zones are going to feature a lot in this article, and we see that with this effect. At the start of the first first battle round, you bombard the opponent's deployment zone in Radiation. Each enemy unit can decide either to stand firm or to take cover. Taking cover immediately battle shocks the unit till the end of the battle round. Importantly, that means that once it comes to their command phase, that battle shock won't wear off and they won't go to retest. They're just automatically battle shocked. If they decide not to take cover, however, you roll a d6 on a 3+, the unit takes d3 mortal wounds. Any battle round beyond the first then suffers the fallout effect. For each enemy unit within your opponent's deployment zone, you roll a die, and on a 3, they take 1 mortal wound. There is, unfortunately for them, no option to take cover from that. It is automatically going to roll. Now, the optional battle shocks across the opponent's entire army is a pretty big deal, but one thing we have to remember is that it is on the first battle round, so it will not affect scoring. There may be some secondary objectives, some secondary missions that will require you to hold objectives that battle shocked units won't be able to do, but for the most part, you're probably going to be able to take D3 mortal wounds on the units that you need to hold objectives, and the other units will just suffer the battle shock, not get stratagems used on them for a round, and then it'll fall off the next round. The other effect is interesting, but a little bit random. A little bit awkward if you play this against Necrons. I guess it is sort of thematically appropriate that like a radiation storm would be ineffective against the immortal robot gods, but just dealing them mortal wounds that they then immediately reanimation protocol can actually just be much better for them. And it really only matters once you're stacking a bunch of damage onto a single unit. Now, the important thing about this is that armies that aren't Necrons and don't have the ability to regenerate models, I think are going to start taking a lot of damage on their small objective holders. So if you have 5 model units, for example, those are going to be dropped below half strength by the constant damage from the fallout and bombardment effects over the course of the game very quickly. And then they're going to start having to test for battle shock. So while on the surface this effect doesn't seem huge, I think that it does have the potential to disrupt scoring on your opponent in the mid to late game, as their backline objective holders that they weren't expecting to take that much damage start to wither and die. It's a pretty interesting ability, but it does seem at least not very interesting, to be honest. That said, starting the game off with a bunch of additional damage on your opponent's army, and with the potential that you can battle shock them and force them not to use defensive stratagems in the first turn, that's kind of a big deal, so that's pretty good. Definitely don't think it's worthless. It's just maybe not the most exciting detachment roll we've seen. That said, we have gotten some data sheets and abilities in this article that are pretty exciting. And the first one we have to talk about are the Everpresence Skitarii Vanguard. These guys have gotten a little bit of a change from their 9th edition incarnation. They've actually lost a point of save, I think maybe to make up for the fact that they do have easy access and potentially repeatable access to that Bulwark imperative to give them that 4+ invulnerable save. They're a standard move 6, toughness 3, only a 5+ save. A little bit weird that these guys are as heavily armored as Imperial Guardsmen, because that has definitely never been their position within the infrastructure of the game, but it is what it is. A single wound and a mediocre leadership of 7, but that impressive objective control value of 2. They are battle line keyworded, and as I said before, battle line matters in this faction, so these guys are going to be seen in a lot of Adeptus Mechanicus armies to project your buffs to other units. We'll talk about an example of those in a moment. They're equipped with a brick of pretty interesting guns, although only a 4+ ballistic skill. However, you do have the ability to give all of those weapons the heavy keyword to then allow them to stand still and go to a 3+ ballistic skill. We're seeing a lot of units reduced to a 4+ ballistic skill these days. The Archaeotech pistol, which I imagine the Alpha can get, has the devastating wounds characteristic, so converting its damage to mortals on a critical wound roll. That's at strength 6 AP 1, but only a 12-inch range. The classic Radium Carbine makes a return with the anti-infantry 4+ effect, wounding all infantry on a 4+. They are still 3 shots at 18 inches, but base only strength 3 with no AP. However, the unit does have an Omnispecs, which allows the entire thing to ignore cover. Then we come to these special and heavy weapons. The Transuranic Arquebus, one of my favorite named weapons in the entire game, comes back with its 36-inch range with the heavy and precision keywords. We still don't have a clear idea of what precision means, but it's likely that it allows you to assign the wounds from the weapon to the target unit. So you can choose to have the Transuranic Arquebus snipe out unit champions, heavy weapon models, characters, things like that. That's firing a single shot, hitting on a 4. Again, it does have that heavy keyword baked in, so likely a 3 a lot of times, at strength 7, AP 2 for a D3 damage. Plasma Calivers have a standard or supercharged profile. We've seen the plasma profile previously in the edition, and this one is no exception. Strength 7, AP 2 on the standard shot, strength 8, AP 3, and 2 damage on the supercharged shot, but it has that hazardous keyword, potentially killing its bearer. We do have a little bit of access to reroll 1s to hit in this faction, however, so overcharging your plasma is not going to be quite as devastating as it would be in factions without access to that. Now, I think the most interesting one out of the selection of special weapons weapons in the unit is the arc rifle. The anti-vehicle EMP weapons have always had slightly different mechanics every edition of the game, and it's interesting to see this one being sort of solidified as this classic combination of anti-vehicle and devastating wounds. Anti-vehicle makes every wound roll of a 4+. In this case, it does tell you what roll you need to get. Converts those into a critical wound automatically. In combination with the devastating wounds ability, any critical wounds then immediately convert the damage into mortal wounds. So, as long as it hits, and it does have rapid fire 1, so it's able to fire 2 shots at 15 inches, as long as those shots hit on a 4+, they're then going to deal D3 mortal wounds to the target vehicle. Base, they are strength 8 AP 1 with D3 damage, which is not a terrible profile, especially with ignoring cover, so you're going to be at least impacting the save of basically every infantry type in the game. But having a very decent shot to pump mortal wounds automatically into vehicle targets is very spicy, especially if vehicles become as big of a mainstay in the new edition as we think. The only downside of arc rifles is that they don't affect monsters, I guess. Otherwise, they seem very good. On top of that, we also have some special abilities. I've already mentioned the Omnispecs, but we see a return of the communications array effect. We've seen this on Voxcasters in the comms array on Leagues of Votann, and it looks like it is being locked in as basically the mechanic for having a communications set. It allows you to regenerate CP on a 5+ when you target the unit with the enhanced data tether with a stratagem. So this means that if you are using that bulwark imperative to give them that additional 4+ invulnerable save, you have a 1 in 3 chance to regenerate those command points. So again, it's going to be pretty efficient to soup these guys up. They also retain their 6+ invulnerable save, so having only a 5+ armor save doesn't feel quite as bad. Although they lose the 5+ in bionic save that they had previously in 9th edition. That was given to them way after the fact, though, to be fair. But most importantly, they have the Rad Saturation aura. This used to reduce the toughness of enemies within 3 inches, which was kind of an interesting effect, but very difficult to actually engage your opponent with. But this one is much more interesting. It reduces the objective control characteristic of models in units within 3 inches of a Skitarii Vanguard by 1. Importantly, this affects the entire unit, not just the model. So as long as a single Skitarii Vanguard gets within 3 inches of, I don't know, 20 Necron Warriors, all of those Necron Warriors are going to be reduced to OC1. Worse still, if you have a unit with only an OC value of 1 to begin with, they're going to be reduced to OC0 and be unable to take objectives from you. So even a single Skitarii Vanguard can hold off an objective against infinite Space Marine Terminators. This ability is amazing both defensively and offensively. Defensively, you can ring an objective with Skitarii Vanguard, and your opponent will most likely have to kill most of the unit in order to take that objective away, even if they outnumber you significantly. Offensively, you can use this in combination with the aggressor imperative to advance and charge the unit to charge onto your opponent's objectives. Well, they don't fight very well. With a large enough unit, it's unlikely that they get killed in the swing back, and you'll be able to reduce the OC value of that enemy unit and basically automatically steal the objective away from them. This ability is super sick, and I think really redefines how Skitarii Vanguard can be used on the table as more of a disruption element rather than a tanky or offensively oriented brick. Although, that's not to say that their weapons are particularly bad. Having anti-infantry and anti-vehicle weapons in high volumes is super useful. Now, also super excitingly within the article, we do get a small example of how that battle line interaction is going to matter. And this is what we were missing from articles like the Necron one, where they discussed leaders a lot, but didn't really showcase any of the interactions with their unit leaders. In this case, we do have the reveal of the Sicarian Rust Stalker's optimized gate ability. This grants the unit +1 to advance and charge. However, if they are within 6 inches of an Adeptus Mechanicus battle line unit, they get +2 instead, doubling the effect. If you combine this with the Aggressor Imperative Stratagem, they're going to double that benefit. So they're getting +1 to advance and charge, they're going to advance at +1, then charge at +1. So that at baseline, you're +2 to your total movement, and if you remain next to a battle line unit for the entirety of your turn, then you'll be +4 instead. If Ruststalkers retain their pretty quick movement value of 8 inches, this gives them a threat range in excess of 21 inches. They're going to be able to advance 10 plus d6, then charge 2d6 plus 2. So they're moving a total of 12 plus 3d6 inches using the Aggressor Imperative Stratagem. This makes these guys an absolutely dangerous melee threat with a pretty long threat range, and I think is an interesting indication of how the interaction between the battle line units and the more elite-oriented damage output in the army is going to work. Also a good example of how Games Workshop is now using the army abilities abilities to encourage people to take battle line units rather than mandating it through force organization. So instead of being punished for not taking a minimum number of Skitarii Rangers or Vanguard units, you now get huge benefits for taking them. So you're going to want to naturally include them in your army anyway, which is just good design. Now next up, we also got the datasheet for Belisarius Call, and I know this one was one that a lot of people were really excited to see. Call is going to be a faction leader like we've seen in the past with Abaddon and Rabute Gilliman, and has some similar abilities. Canticles of the Omnissiah return as a Call-specific aura. At the start of each battle round, he chooses a canticle to recite and gets that as an aura to units within 6 inches of him. Either Invocation of Machine Vengeance, which gives reroll hit rolls of 1 to any attacks to Adeptus Mechanicus models within 6. Again, this is where we're going to be getting that easy access to reroll 1s. Belisarius Call will just project it as an aura. Mantra of Discipline gives you reroll leadership in battle shock tests within 6 inches, and Shroud Psalm gives you stealth, which we still don't know what it does. Call himself operates a lot like Rabute Gilliman in that he gains the lone operative keyword within 3 inches of one or more friendly Adeptus Mechanicus units. Importantly, this is not keyworded to a specific type, and also, unlike previous versions of the Lookout Sir rule, you get this regardless of the size of the unit triggering it. So he could stand next to a tank and get lone operative, or he could stand next to a single Skitarii Vanguard and similarly get it. And lone operative, as a reminder, just makes you untargetable outside 12 inches for enemy ranged attacks. Even if he does get targeted, Belisarius Call has a pretty decent defensive profile at toughness 8 with a 2+ base save, 4+ invulnerable save, 10 wounds, and self-repair mechanisms to regenerate D3 of those wounds in each of your command phases. Call is largely a support character, however. He isn't the most exciting guy when it comes into getting into melee. He does have a lot of attacks with his Arc Scourge swinging 4 times, hitting on 2s with anti-vehicle 4+ and devastating wounds, the same combination that we just saw on the Arc Rifle. He also gets 2d6 attacks hitting on 3s from his Mecha Dendrite Hive, but they are only Strength 4 AP 0. And the big headliner is his Omniscient Axe, 4 attacks hitting on 2s at Strength 8 AP 2 damage.
It's editing Trevi here, and before we move on from the melee weapons, I do just want to emphasize once more time, before we talk about Call's other traits, just the immense glow up that this model has received in terms of its physical profile. It's gone from toughness 6 to toughness 8, a 5+ invulnerable save to a 4+ invulnerable save. Its Omniscient Axe has gone up in strength, and although that strength isn't quite as valuable as it was previously, that is still good at killing lighter infantry, and instead of having to choose between making attacks with its Arc Scourge or Omniscient Axe, it just gets both. So Belisarius Call has significantly more attacks than he did previously. While he's not quite as good as buffing as he was in 8th edition, on top of his other effects, he is an absolute badass when it comes to his personal stats.
If he wants to do damage to tanks, his Solar Atomizer is the way to go. It's a D6 shot Melta weapon, interestingly with Melta D3, meaning that when he fires at half range, each of those successfully converted wounds is going to do D3 plus 3 damage because the base damage is 3 and you're adding D3 additional. A good example of how the Melta rule is no longer just plus 2 damage, it's now plus whatever the designers decided. It has the blast characteristic, so it's still going to be useful against larger units, and hits on 2s at an impressive strength 14 AP4 for 3 damage. Once Call gets within that 9-inch range, vehicles are going to be pretty terrified of this weapon profile. Wounds most vehicles in the game on 3s, except for Necron Monoliths, as we've seen so far, and he might be able to finish one off with his melee profile if he's able to put a big hit in with the Atomizer first. So overall, I think Belisarius Call is an interesting place for a faction leader like this to sit. He definitely looks like a powerful piece on the table, but not quite as auto-include or centerpiece as Abaddon or Rabute Gilliman are. He's definitely a really big deal, but maybe not quite as big a deal as those Astartes heroes. Now last in the article, and I don't know, maybe least, we also got a single weapon spoiled in addition to everything else. This is the Eradication Beamer from the Onager Dunecrawler. We see that it has 2 profiles just like it has in the past, and they've gotten a little bit of a glow up. Previously, they were strength 8 and had variable AP and damage depending on the range that you fired it at. The focused, shorter ranged attack was much more powerful. And we see that carried over, but with some new and spicy abilities. Both weapons retain their D6 shot characteristic with the blast keyword, so still going to be pretty decent against high volume units. Both, however, only have a 4+ ballistic skill. Fortunately, the Onager Dunecrawler now no longer degrades, so it is going to retain a 4+ ballistic skill for longer than it did previously. These don't have the heavy keyword built in, but they can gain it from the Protector imperative, so maybe they'll be hitting on 3 some of the time. An Onager Dunecrawler is definitely one of those units that you kind of want to be sitting out in the open and shooting for a while, so that might be the play pattern. In addition, however, we do get the sustained hits D3 mechanic, and this is what we're seeing basically baked into every beam weapon in the game. Anything that uses a ray or a beam or a laser is essentially getting this sustained hits D3, which is conceptually, I think, meant to represent the fact that the beam is hitting the target and continuously delivering damage over a long period of time, which I kind of like. That is how lasers work. In this case, the dissipated attack is coming in at strength 9, AP 2 damage, a little bit of a reduction on AP, and a side grade on strength. The strength used to be 8 in the previous edition, which wounded most vehicles in the game on 4s. Now, strength 9 is more equivalent to what was strength 7 in 9th edition, wounding most vehicles on 4s and wounding a lot of the more heavily armored vehicles on 5s. The focus profile retains the same strength value at 9, however bumps up an AP and a damage at AP 3 damage. A much more effective anti-vehicle profile, but only at the 18-inch range. It retains the same number of attacks, blast, and sustained hit keywords, just like the dissipated shot does. Overall, pretty interesting side grade to the weapon. Losing some strength is unfortunate, but getting that sustained hits D3 effect is pretty powerful. If you do roll that 6 to hit, you're going to be potentially doubling the effective damage of the weapon, which gets pretty spiky depending on how many additional sustained hits you roll and how many 6s you roll. There's definitely somebody who's going to roll 6 shots and 3 6s and hit 10 times, and their opponent is going to cry a little bit inside. But with that, that is the entirety of the Adeptus Mechanicus spoiler article. And as we've been moving through these articles, we've been getting less and less huge rule reveals, which is a little unfortunate given that we still have some open questions about how the core mechanics of Warhammer 40k will work in 10th edition, but we are getting some more comprehensive looks at how the factions operate. And I think the Adeptus Mechanicus article here is a pretty good idea of that. We get hints at some interesting mechanics like the battle line synergies, as well as their Doctrina synergies, and we get mechanics that key off of those. I think the Sicarian Rostalkers, specifically alongside those Skitarii Vanguard, look absolutely incredible. This is going to allow you to play either a very defensively oriented Adeptus Mechanicus playstyle, where you use the Protector Imperative to reduce damage on your guys and give yourself bonuses to hit, or you're going to play the aggressive Conqueror Imperative playstyle. You're going to run onto your opponent's objectives, reduce their objective control, and kill them with Sicarian Rostalkers, and just take away all of their ability to score. Either way, it seems really powerful and pretty cool. While the detachment ability is not that interesting, either of these playstyles seems really powerful and really cool, so I'm excited to see Adeptus Mechanicus get some love, and it seems like Games Workshop's doing them right this time. They've had a little bit of trouble balancing Adeptus Mechanicus in the past, and this one seems pretty good. But anyway, let me know down in the comment section what you think about it. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts about admech, and thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Big thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers. All you people are great, and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.